If you've ever believed in fairy tales, don't, because mine turned into a nightmare before the honeymoon suite's champagne even lost its chill. They say you should share this with someone who still believes in happily ever after, so they can hear what happens when you marry a man with a secret. I was still in my wedding dress, still glowing from the lights, the love, the speeches that felt like promises. We were in the penthouse suite of the Bellagio, the city of Vegas glittering behind the glass, when I stepped out of the bathroom and heard his voice. Low, urgent, and nothing like the man who'd just vowed forever to me. "No, baby, it's done. She signed the papers, and the money's clean. I'll be back in a week, just let me play the husband until then." My feet froze. My nails, still painted ivory to match my bouquet, dug into the silk clutch. I'd left on the counter. The blood drained from my face so fast it felt like drowning. He was on the balcony, back turned, laughing softly into the phone. My husband of less than 5 hours. I slid back into the bathroom, closed the door without a sound, and sank to the cold marble floor. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was calculating. There was no screaming, no sobbing. Not yet. Just the acid taste of betrayal and the sickening click of puzzle pieces falling into place. The prenup I insisted on. He pushed me to sign it just 2 weeks before the wedding, said his lawyers needed it for tax reasons. My trust fund from my grandmother had just matured. It was a week in Vegas where his company just happened to be holding a real estate summit. I felt the bile rise. He wasn't just cheating, he was using me, and not even smart enough to cover his tracks. Not tonight. He came in, smiling, drunk on champagne and victory, kissing my forehead like nothing had happened. I kissed him back. I let him believe he'd won, because if this was going to be a game, I was going to play it better. He took my name, my ring, my life. Now I'm taking his. The next morning, I lay beside him, watching the sunlight drip through the curtains like melted gold. He looked peaceful, lips slightly parted, one arm flung across the empty space, where I should have been curled, a beautiful lie, sleeping beside me. I studied every angle of his face like I was memorizing the enemy. He woke to the scent of espresso and the sound of my humming. "Babe," he croaked, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early." I smiled so gently it scared even me. "Jet lag, I figured I'd grab us some coffee before the summit today." His eyes flickered, just a beat too long. "You remember that's a closed event, right? Strictly VIPs." "Of course," I said, pressing a warm mug into his palm. "I'll just spa it up today. You go do your thing." He kissed me, lingering. I married a goddess. I played along, biting back the urge to ask what he called the other woman. Probably baby. Maybe even goddess, too. Recycled romance, it always reeks. Once he left, I didn't go to the spa. I went straight to his suitcase. He'd locked it. Amateur move. I grabbed a butter knife from the minibar tray and had the cheap combination latch popped. In under 5 minutes. Inside, dress shirts, a bottle of expensive cologne, his laptop, and a black leather folder labeled Gideon Projects Confidential. I photographed every page, every document. I didn't even know what I was looking for yet, but I'd know it when I saw it. And then there it was, bank statements, transfers, one in my name, another in a company I'd never heard of, and one suspiciously large to someone named Lee T. Bennett. I paused. Lee? A woman's name, maybe, or maybe not. I snapped a photo of that one twice. Then I checked his laptop. Password protected, of course. I was about to close it when I remembered something. He once told me, during one of our deep couple chats, that his mother's birthday was his good luck number. October 3rd. I typed 1003. The screen opened like a mouth inviting me in. Inside was a folder titled Personal. Password protected too. But I wasn't worried, because I hadn't even started yet. When he came back that evening, he brought roses. Kissed me like a husband should. Made love to me like he still thought I was his, and I let him. Because the longer he believed I was his, the sweeter it would be when I showed him I never really was. That night, as he lay sleeping next to me, his breathing slow and even, I stared at the ceiling in silence. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was strategy. I pulled my robe on and tiptoed into the living room of the suite. The clock on the minibar blinked 2:13 a.m. My fingers shook as I opened my laptop and typed in the notes I'd made. Lee T. Bennett, possible alias or mistress. Gideon projects, financial inconsistencies, prenup signed under false pretenses. This wasn't revenge for the sake of pain. This was war for the sake of truth, and to win it, I needed help. I didn't trust anyone in his circle, but I had someone. My ex, Julian. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 2 years. We didn't end badly. We just ended because we were too young, too messy, too unsure. But if there was one thing Julian was still brilliant at, it was digital forensics and quietly hating liars. So I texted him, "Julian, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. I need you. Something's not right with my husband." I stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute before pressing send. He responded 6 minutes later. What did he do? By morning, we had a plan. I'd send Julian the files and documents. He'd trace the money trails, vet the names, and look into the shell companies listed under Gideon projects. I told him I needed discretion, and he promised me invisibility. Later that day, as my husband preened in front of the suite mirror, adjusting his tie before heading to the summit, he kissed me on the cheek and said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, baby." I smiled. I know. He left, and I left too, but not to the spa. This time, I went to the summit venue and bribed a bellhop to let me into one of the private conference rooms after hours. I needed to see what kind of business my new husband was really conducting and whether this Gideon project was even real. Inside the empty room, I searched the trash bins, the podium, even peeked into a folder someone had left behind. And then I found it, a printed schedule of speakers. His name wasn't on it, not once. I stood there in the cold silence, gripping the page in my hands, the truth seeping in like a slow poison. He hadn't come here for business. He wasn't here to work. He'd come to Vegas for the wedding, the money, and someone else entirely. And now I had proof. But what I needed next was leverage, because love didn't just die in me. It evolved. It sharpened. When I got back to the suite that night, I knew something had shifted. He was sprawled on the couch in a half-unbuttoned dress shirt, sipping whiskey, looking smug. Too smug, like a man who thought he had all the pieces exactly where he wanted them. "You look tired," he said, eyes barely flicking up as I entered. "Long day at the spa?" I gave a soft chuckle and sank into the armchair. Across from him. "Yeah, deep tissue massage. I think I'm still floating." He smiled like he believed me. I watched his thumb circle the rim of his glass. His tell. He was hiding something. "So," I said lightly, "how was the summit?" He hesitated, just for a breath. "Same old. Talks, handshakes, overpriced shrimp cocktails." I leaned forward, tracing a lazy finger over the armrest. "Funny. I thought you were a keynote speaker." His smile faltered. "Barely. What?" "I mean, that's what you told my dad, right? Back at the rehearsal dinner. You said you'd be headlining the Gideon pitch at the summit." He sat up slowly, eyes narrowing. "Why are you bringing that up now?" I shrugged. "Just curious. I looked over the speaker list today. Didn't see your name anywhere." The room went still, thick with tension. "I didn't know you were snooping around," he said finally. His voice flat. "And I didn't know you were lying." I met his gaze, calm, cold. "So I guess we're even." He stood then, fast, pacing once before turning to me. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" I stood too, slowly, and walked over to him. "Nothing, yet." He tilted his head. "You're playing with fire." I smiled sweetly. "Oh, honey, I am fire." I let that sit between us, let it spark, burn, flicker behind his eyes, as he realized I wasn't the doe-eyed bride he'd duped. Not anymore. That night, he slept with one eye open. I knew because I stayed up watching him, waiting for the fear to bloom. Behind his calm exterior. It hadn't fully cracked yet, but it would. The next morning, Julian sent me a message. "Found something. Lee T. Bennett isn't just a name, it's an offshore account. And he's been funneling your trust money into it. Quietly, weekly, since the engagement." My breath caught. My heart didn't break this time. It turned to steel. And from steel, I began to build a plan. He wanted my money. He wanted my name. Now I was going to give him a reason to regret both. I booked a couple's massage for us that morning. Something romantic, indulgent, distracting. He beamed when I suggested it. Already convinced, he twisted me back around his finger. That was his first mistake. Letting his guard down. While he undressed behind the privacy curtain in the spa room, I slipped his phone from his slacks and stepped into the hallway. Like I'd forgotten something. Less than 90 seconds. That's all I needed. I didn't want to search it. Not yet. I just wanted one thing, the passcode. I handed the phone to Julian via secure cloud backup that same night. He was already working on the financial trail, and now I'd given him access to the heart of my husband's secrets. Texts, call logs, emails. Julian promised to clone it without alerting any flags. The massage itself was excruciating. Not physically, but emotionally. Lying side by side, pretending to be the loved and loving wife while he rested his hand on mine. Like it was ownership. He even whispered, "I'm glad we did this. Feels like we're in sync again." I turned my head just enough to smile at him. You have no idea. That night, Julian sent me a screenshot, an email. One that nearly made me vomit. "Darling, the marriage license processed today. She has no clue. Once we're back in LA, I'll file for annulment. She'll walk away thinking it was her fault, just like we planned. Then the trust fund clears. We're almost there." Sent from my husband to someone named l.bennett@outlook.com. Lee, she wasn't just a mistress. She was his partner, his co-conspirator. And they weren't just stealing from me, they were playing me, gaslighting me into thinking I had a real marriage. Just long enough for them to claim the money and walk away. And I would have let them. I would have cried in silence, blamed myself, walked away ashamed and hollow, but not now. Now I had the full picture. And now I had a reason to make it hurt. I started drafting a fake email from my husband's address. Julian mirrored the domain, crafted a secure proxy, and made sure it looked authentic. It read, "Change of plans. I told her everything. Couldn't hold it anymore. I'm going to leave with her instead. You'll get your cut. But I'm out. Do not contact me again." Then we sat on it, because timing is everything. He'd built a castle on deception. I was going to bring the whole thing down, brick by careful brick. I woke the next morning to him making room service calls, talking about mimosas and breakfast in bed, like we were newlyweds in a magazine spread. I leaned against the bathroom doorframe, arms crossed, watching him. He was so damn convincing. That was the worst part. His lies wore a tuxedo and smiled for photos. No wonder I bought them. But now I wasn't just watching him, I was studying him. I knew the money in the trust wouldn't be released until we returned to LA. That's why he needed this honeymoon to go perfectly, to keep me wrapped in silk sheets. And cheap seduction long enough to get what he wanted. And now, with Julian's help, I was going to make it unravel. At breakfast, I asked casually, "Hey, do you think we should go skydiving tomorrow?" He blinked. "You? Skydiving?" "Yeah," I said, buttering a croissant like I wasn't planning his emotional execution. "Something wild. I mean, we only get one honeymoon, right?" He laughed and reached across the table for my hand. "God, I love you." I didn't even flinch. That afternoon, while he showered, I opened his laptop again. This time, I planted the fake email Julian crafted, the one where he supposedly told Lee he was backing out. I left it half-written in the drafts folder, like something he'd started in guilt and forgotten to delete. Next, I forwarded that draft to Lee's email address, timed for delivery at midnight. Julian would spoof it from the hotel's network. When she saw it, she'd believe he'd turned on her. Panic would set in, trust would fracture, and from there, everything would start to bleed. I didn't stop there. I found an old folder labeled Photos, Miami. Inside were selfies of him and Lee, beach shots, hotel beds, kisses, timestamp 6 months before our wedding. Perfect. I downloaded 5 of them to a flash drive. Then I slipped that flash drive into the side pocket of my cosmetics bag, just close enough to be found if someone were snooping. And I wanted him to snoop, because paranoia breeds mistakes. That evening, I poured him a glass of wine, slipped into a silk slip he always loved, and whispered, "Let's make tonight unforgettable." He smiled like the wolf he was, and I smiled like the girl he thought was prey. But I wasn't prey anymore. I was the storm walking him straight into the fire. By the next morning, the first domino had already tipped. He was quiet at breakfast, not anxious, not suspicious, just off. Like his brain was half a step behind something it couldn't quite process yet. I watched him cut into his eggs like he didn't trust the center. Like something hidden might leak out. I knew what he was thinking. Had he sent something by mistake? Did Lee get the wrong idea? She had, thanks to me. Julian confirmed she'd received the email right at midnight, opened it 5 times in the span of an hour, then stopped responding to any of his messages. She hadn't replied. She hadn't even read the ones after. Silence, the kind that makes men like my husband sweat. We walked the strip like any happy couple, took photos in front of the fountains, held hands, kissed beneath the Eiffel Tower replica, and all the while I watched his mask twitch, crack, struggle to stay in place. "Is something wrong?" I asked sweetly as we browsed inside a jewelry shop. "No," he said, voice tight. "Why? You just seemed distracted." He forced a smile. "Just thinking about the transfer." "The trust?" I asked, feigning innocence. "That's already taken care of, right?" He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just dotting I's, crossing T's. You know how lawyers are?" I gave a soft laugh, slipping my arm through his. "Well, once we get back to LA, everything will be perfect." He didn't answer. He was already in his head panicking. That night, I laid the next trap. While he was in the shower, I placed the flash drive, the one with the damning photos of him and Lee, half tucked into the lining of my travel makeup bag, obvious enough to catch if he was snooping. Then I forgot to zip the bag fully. He never could resist temptation. He was the kind of man who checked your texts when you were asleep and deleted his own. I knew he'd look, and once he did, he'd know the photos were out of his control. I wanted him unbalanced, questioning everything. I wanted him afraid I knew, because fear makes men sloppy, and a sloppy man with secrets is a gift. By morning, he was edgy. He kissed me too quickly, touched me too little. He checked his phone obsessively when he thought I wasn't looking. Julian texted. He tried to log into the dummy email we used. He's spiraling. Good, because tomorrow we were flying back to LA, and tomorrow night, the real show would begin. We flew home first class, champagne, white linen napkins, fake smiles, the whole performance. He held my hand during takeoff, like he always did, said it helped with the pressure in his ears. I let him. I even leaned my head on his shoulder, acting like the devoted wife returning from the perfect honeymoon. But inside, I was sharpening the final blade. When we landed at LAX, everything moved fast. My father's attorney had confirmed the trust disbursement would be processed by end of day. The money, my inheritance, would officially shift into our joint marital account. At least, that was the plan. But I had already moved it. Every last cent. Julian helped me set up a protected holding account 2 days prior. Completely legal, ironclad. I just hadn't told my husband, which made watching him open our shared banking app in the Uber on the way home so much sweeter. His jaw tightened. What is it?" I asked, resting my head on his arm. He smiled thinly. "Just lag. Bank's probably updating the balance." I nodded. Of course. It was a holiday weekend. He didn't speak for the rest of the drive, and when we got home, he barely looked at me. As we unpacked, I could feel him slipping into damage control mode, running scenarios, trying to stay 3 steps ahead of a threat. He didn't even understand yet, and then it happened. He waited until I was in the kitchen, pouring wine, and snuck into the bedroom to check my makeup bag again. I heard the zipper. He didn't know I was watching from the hallway mirror, the angle just enough to catch his reflection. He found the flash drive, slipped it into his laptop, clicked through the files. I watched his whole body stiffen as the images of him and Lee lit up the screen. He stared at the screen for a long time. I couldn't see his face fully, but I didn't need to. I knew that look. She knows. I stepped into the doorway just as he yanked the drive. From the port, he spun to face me. "You went through my things," I said softly. He opened his mouth to speak, to lie, to invent some pathetic excuse, but I held up a hand. "I know," I whispered. "All of it. Lee, the trust, the email, you lied to me. From the very beginning." His shoulders dropped, mouth working silently before the mask slipped back on. It's not what you think. Oh, it is, I said, walking toward him, slow and steady. It's exactly what I think. He stepped back, suddenly afraid. Okay, just listen. We can fix this. I messed up, I'll admit that. But I love you. That's real. I tilted my head. You love me? I do. Then why does Lee think you're running away with her? He froze, and I smiled. Because tomorrow was the day I'd destroy them both. He didn't speak for a long time after that, just stood there, one hand clenched around the flash drive like it might still save him. I watched his eyes darting, recalculating, searching for the lie that would make all of this disappear. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said finally, the arrogance creeping back in. Lay's nothing. She was leverage, not love. This was about business, not, you signed a marriage license to scam me. I interrupted. You used my grandmother's trust, my name, and my body to play house with a woman who helped you plan it. Don't you dare insult me by calling it business. I panicked. He snapped. The money was too good, and yeah, I was wrong, but I came back to you. Doesn't that mean anything? I stepped closer, quiet, calm. You didn't come back to me, you just never expected me to catch up. He reached out, maybe to touch my arm, maybe to beg. I stepped back. Where's the money? He asked, voice dropping. Don't lie to me, Emma. I know the transfer. Should have gone through. It did, I said, just not to you. He blinked, stunned. You were so busy watching me, trying to catch me sleeping, that you didn't see I'd already moved it. His face twisted, part rage, part disbelief. You can't do that. We're married. That money's not anymore, I said, holding up a folder. These are annulment papers. I filed the day after the wedding. My attorney expedited everything. We never consummated the marriage legally. You signed under false pretenses. Fraud invalidates it all. You're bluffing. No, I whispered. I'm finishing. And then the doorbell rang. He froze. Who's that? I smiled, walked past him, and opened the door. Julian stepped inside, calm and collected in a pressed suit, holding a small camera in his hand. Hi, husband, he said, not looking at my soon-to-be ex. You're going to want to sit down for this. What the hell is this? My husband snapped. Julian hit play on the camera. It was a video security footage pulled from the hotel's internal servers. Clear as day, my husband, entering Lee's room the morning after our wedding, kissing her, handing her a folder. Another cut, them talking on the balcony, her flipping through bank statements, him pointing to my name. I stepped beside Julian and folded my arms. Now, I said, you can either leave quietly or I send this to the DA. Fraud, financial exploitation, wire transfer conspiracy, your choice. His jaw clenched. You don't have proof I transferred anything, he spat. Julian grinned. Actually, I do. You used her name on a shell account, which I traced, right before I shut it down. My husband looked between us, defeated, cornered, humiliated. He left without a word, just grabbed his phone, his jacket, and slammed the door behind him. I stood in the quiet for a moment, shaking, and then Julian turned to me, voice soft. You okay? I nodded. Not yet, but I will be. The silence after he left felt different. It wasn't peace, not yet. It was like the air right after a hurricane, still humid, still heavy, but the wind had stopped screaming. I sat down on the edge of the couch, staring at the front door like I expected him to walk back in and say it was all a joke. But he didn't. Julian sat across from me, elbows on his knees, watching me carefully. You did it, he said quietly. I laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was hollow, almost disbelieving. Yeah, I did. And then I cried. Not the kind of tears you cry after a breakup, or even betrayal. These were the deep, choking sobs of someone who'd held everything in for too long. The hurt, the shame, the guilt, for trusting, for loving, for not seeing what was right in front of me. Julian moved beside me, didn't say a word, just sat there, still and steady, until I stopped shaking. I feel disgusting, I whispered, wiping my face, like I have to scrub him off me. He handed me his handkerchief. You were played, it happens. Doesn't make you weak, it means you had a heart. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder. I thought I was building a life. Turns out I was just a character in his con. No, he said firmly. You were the mark, but you flipped the whole damn game. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stayed up rereading the email Lee never responded to. She still hadn't replied, which meant the final phase was still unfolding, and the next morning she made her move. I woke to an email, anonymous sender, no subject line, just a single line in the message. You think you're smart? I built this plan. You were just the pretty distraction. Watch what happens next. Attached was a screenshot. Me, from our honeymoon, sitting at the spa bar with a drink in hand, smiling. Alone. She must have hired someone to tail me, maybe even since before the wedding. But she didn't understand something very basic. I didn't come this far to be intimidated. She wanted war, then war it would be. Because while he ran scared, she was still out there, watching, planning, vengeful. And that made her dangerous. But not as dangerous as me. I forwarded the email to Julian immediately, then paced the kitchen with that cold electric tension buzzing through my veins. She's bluffing, he said over speaker. She's rattled, desperate. No, I replied, staring at the photo of myself, taken without my knowledge, somewhere I thought was safe. She's calculating, and she doesn't panic. She escalates. Julian was silent for a moment, then we escalate too. I pulled out the folder of photos again, the ones I had staged to rattle him. I hadn't shown them to Lee, not yet, but now they were leverage, proof of her involvement, her presence, her proximity to every dollar he tried to steal. So I drafted a reply. You think I'm a distraction? Cute. I have enough evidence to end both of you, and if you want to know what happens next, let's meet in person, somewhere public, your move. I set it to send after 5 minutes and waited. 12 minutes later, she responded. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Griffith Park Observatory. Come alone. Julian insisted on trailing me. I didn't argue. I knew Lee wouldn't trust a setup, but I also knew better than to go completely blind. The next morning, I wore black. Not because I was mourning, but because I wanted her to feel the funeral in every step I took. She was already there when I arrived, dressed in white. Like the irony was deliberate. Long platinum hair, reflective sunglasses, and that cold model poise of someone who'd never been told no often enough in her life. You brought a tale, she said without turning around. You brought a threat, I replied. She smiled. Fair enough. We stood in silence for a beat too long, the skyline of Los Angeles stretching beneath us. Tourists wandered nearby, oblivious to the quiet war taking place just 10 feet from them. You think you've won, she said at last, but he was never your husband. He was my project. You were the glitter to keep him compliant. You mean the shield, the legal buffer, the name that gave you access to my money. I crossed my arms. Why didn't you do it yourself, Lee? Afraid you wouldn't survive the fallout? I'm not afraid of anything, she said flatly. You should be. She took off her sunglasses then, finally letting me see her eyes. They weren't wild, they were focused, calm, like she still had one move left, and she believed it would be enough. I have a backup plan, she said, her voice soft. And unlike him, I know how to disappear. I stepped closer. So do I. But here's the difference. When I disappear, I make sure what's left behind burns. She blinked. I know about the offshore accounts, the fake nonprofits, the real estate shell fronts. I have documentation with both your names on it, and it's already been prepped for release if anything happens to me. She didn't reply, but the small twitch in her jaw told me I'd hit the target. This is your one and only out, Lee, I said. Walk away, stay gone, and pray I never decide to finish what you started. She stared at me a moment longer, then turned and walked. No apology, no fear, just silence. But I knew she heard me. I knew she'd stay gone, because when women like Lee finally realize they've lost, they vanish, not out of weakness, out of self-preservation. 2 weeks passed. It was strange how quickly life tried to snap back into place, like nothing had happened. The groceries still needed buying, the mail still showed up, my calendar still buzzed with reminders, dentist appointment, rent due, therapy session, and yet every moment felt different, like I was living in the skin of someone else, someone harder, quieter, a woman who had looked love in the face and watched it bare its teeth. Julian came by one evening, unannounced but welcome. He brought Chinese food and his usual quiet calm. "You look lighter," he said, setting the bag on the table. "I feel empty," I replied, honest, but not in a bad way. More like, space has finally been made. We ate on the floor, no plates, just takeout boxes and cheap chopsticks, like we were back in college. He didn't push, didn't ask how I was holding up. He knew the answer was complicated. I transferred the last batch of documentation. "To your lawyer," he said. "Everything's sealed. If they try anything again, it'll trigger the legal nuke." I nodded. "Good." "And the annulment is final," he added. "You're officially unmarried." A beat passed. I looked up at him. "Weird, right? Married, unmarried, just words." "Words carry weight," he said, "but they don't define you." I smiled, tired but real. They tried to make me feel stupid for loving, like I should have known better, like trusting someone was a flaw. "It wasn't," he said. "It was human." We sat in silence for a while after that, watching the sky darken through the window. I thought about everything, about my wedding dress, still bagged and shoved into the back of the closet, about the honeymoon photos I never posted, about the man who walked out of my life like he was late for something else. And then I thought about the part of me that survived it, the part that fought back, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because revenge wasn't just about hurting them. It was about reminding myself I was never the weak one. I stood, stretched, and walked to the window. Below, the city moved on. Cars, lights, people living their lives without ever knowing. What nearly broke me. Julian stepped behind me, not too close, but near enough to remind me I wasn't alone. And I whispered, more to myself than to him, "I loved the wrong man, but I never lost the right woman. If you made it all the way here, thank you. For listening, for believing me, for holding space for this story to exist. It's over now, but I'm just beginning."